The biggest difficulty in making a change, I'd say, is identity, which is, can you conceive of yourself as a better version of you? That includes things that currently you don't believe is possible for you.
Please note, the content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. Hello. Today I am joined by the amazing Igor Ledochowski. Did I pronounce it correctly?
You did. Thank you so much.
Oh, amazing. As someone whose surname is constantly butchered, it is a joy and an honor to actually pronounce it well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
So I'm so excited that you are here today because you are the creator of mind-bending language and you are the master of conversational hypnosis. Are they accurate titles?
I guess so. In terms of mind-bending language, remember, there's always a pedigree. So my version of mind-bending language was built on the work of another man, John Overdurf.
Okay.
He had something called Beyond Words and attention shifting coaching and so on. So I took those principles and I built them to my system. So it depends on how you look at it. If you look at it strictly as a title, yes, I'm the inventor. If you look at it more broadly in terms of the history of where that kind of approach came from, then I'm just part of a link in a longer chain.
So modest you are, so modest. How did your journey in hypnosis begin? Because I know that in a former life, you were a lawyer.
Yeah, I was. So look, my first taste of hypnosis, aside from normal TV stuff and so on, was when I was about 18 or so. I was just gone to university, and we had a big family reunion where I met some cousins, one of which had overcome all kinds of difficulties using a particular self-hypnosis method. I really liked what he was talking about. So long story short, I signed up for a course, went for like a weekend course. My very first hypnotic induction I ever experienced was so amazingly blissful. All my cares, all my concerns, all my aches, all my pains, everything disappeared. And for 20 minutes, half an hour or so, I was in bliss. And that just blew my mind. I thought, whatever this is, I've got to learn more about this. So I learned a little bit whilst I was a student. Time and funds were not really on my side yet. It wasn't really until I became a lawyer and started working crazy hours, 10 o'clock at night, 3 in the morning, wasn't uncommon, weekends and so on, that I found my time was so consumed by everything legal. I was hanging out with lawyers, working with lawyers, doing things with lawyers. All my other friend group were falling away because my work rhythm didn't allow for much anything else. So in some respects, I basically signed up into a year-long hypnosis course, like on weekends, just to give me something that had nothing to do with the law, something that I enjoyed doing as a kind of a break. And then basically from there, that's where things started taking off.
You fell in love. So from a lawyer to hypnosis,
yes.
Juicy question, what are the crossovers?
Yeah, right. Well, let's put it this way. I worked for like a big global firm, and no one there understood why I was leaving basically the cream of the crop to go and become this weird thing called hypnotist, right?
Which back in that day, I mean, I know you're only 21 now, but back in that day was even more bold than it would be now.
Yes. That was over 20 years ago, 25 years ago now, roughly, right? So they thought it was nuts. My family likely was very supportive. I think the big crossover is this. Both law and especially a solicitor, which is what I was, and hypnosis are, should we say, communication tools. A lawyer has to communicate complex ideas to their clients, and importantly, also understand where clients are coming from, in the sense that clients very often will ask for something, a trust or some other vehicle that they think they want, but what they actually want, what they actually need, is something very different. They just saw someone else do this, and I want whatever they've had, but they don't realize the situation is different. So it's very important to dissect a request, reinterpret it, and then present to them a better answer in a way that's acceptable to them, shall we say. That's exactly what happens in hypnotherapy as well, right? What people think they want and what they actually want and need to overcome the problem are usually often not the same thing.
Yeah, wow.
And the reason for that is because if you can solve the problems you can solve logically with your normal thinking, left side sort of consciousness, well, those are the problems you solve every day. You're hungry, you make a sandwich, right? Your car's empty, you fill it up. So those are normal everyday problems that we can solve consciously. The problem comes when you have problems that you can't solve consciously. And then you're just running round and round and round the same merry-go-round, trying to fix the same thing, but you can't fix it because you're fixing it in the wrong place.
Hmm.
It's like saying my house needs a new paint job, and then you go and paint the neighbor's house. Right? It's not going to help,
Yeah.
right?
Well, it'll help
Um,
them, but not you.
yeah, of course it'll help them. It'll help someone, but not necessarily you. So this, I think, where hypnosis really shines. It's
Yeah.
making sure you're painting the right room at the right time. If that
Oh,
makes sense.
nice analogy. Nice metaphor, hey? So, what is
Cool.
one huge aha that you wish everybody knew about their subconscious mind?
All learning, all behavior, all change happens subconsciously first.
Mm.
And that means whenever you struggle to learn something or to change something or to upgrade your behaviors and actions, it makes sense to talk to the unconscious or get involved in some way. I'm not saying you can't do top down change, consciously willing something and so on. It's just that's the hard way of doing it, right? So if you were to recruit the subconscious to come with it, everything becomes easier, faster, better.
And I want to play a little game with you, if it's okay,
Sure.
a game of misconception. So, I'm going to shoot some objections your way and some fears, and we'll
Okay.
see what your comebacks are.
Okay.
So, I'm scared I'm going to get stuck in hypnosis.
How come?
Oh, wow. Good question. Okay, I'm not going to answer that. I'm scared I'm going to lose control in hypnosis.
Okay. So what's so bad if you did?
Oh, wow, I love your approach.
So clearly something about the way I approach it is resonating with you. Do you mind if I ask what?
Oh, I love it. I love that you're turning it around. Instead of allowing this
Yeah.
quote fear to just rule me, you're
Yeah.
roadblocking it in the
Yeah.
moment so that it turns around and I have to actually consider, hang on a second, what is this unconscious pattern that's coming out? I love it.
Yeah. And I think this is a pretty good way of dealing with any resistance.
Yeah.
People feel obliged, like, oh, it's up to me now to change you. I can't change you.
Yeah.
You can change you. I can nudge you. I can give you experiences. I can show you an experience that might actually be more useful to you than the ones you've chosen, but I can't physically change you. And so this is one of the biggest problems, by the way, in coaching and hypnotherapy and so on, is when the coach or the hypnotherapist feels obliged to get you your change,
Yeah.
right? And we try really hard. And the harder we try, the more we engage the law of reverse effect and the more it all falls apart. So I used to try to, persuade people, oh, don't be silly. There wasn't going to happen. It'll be fine and all the rest of it. And of course, the harder, like, let's put it this way. You talk to someone and they say to you, trust me, this will work, right? Well, if they were trustable, why would they say trust me?
Can I just point out the fact that your facial reaction in order to get that level of trust and the tonality was just so squished? That was so hard. That was so funny. Very, very congruent of you.
Thank you. But you get the idea here, right?
Yeah.
So the simplest way in terms of kind of influencing and helping other people and so on is don't take anything personally, right? If you have problems with hypnosis, I get it. Lots of people do. So just explain to me, how did you get to that point? Because there's always something underneath it. The things people say is just the last stage of a long chain of reasoning, some of which may have started in childhood, with the age of 1, 2, 3 years old, and then that got added to and added to and added to, and came to this big conclusion at the end that they're so convinced is reality. But if you start following the chain downwards, at some point it dissolves, right?
That's
the
so
easiest
cool.
way to overcoming problems is follow the chain back to the point where your reasoning was faulty, and it always is at some point. And then once it's exposed, most people go, oh, well, maybe there's something else to look at. This I call the law of ontogeny. When you doubt what you know, you leave room to grow. And that's really essentially what we've been doing with your objections. I'll happily take some more if you want. But that's
they're not mine. They're not mine. I'm just trying to cover off general.
I get what you mean.
Yeah.
You're playing some objection games and so on.
Yeah.
And so that's the easiest way of dealing with any kind of objection, whether
That's
it's sales,
so cool.
Relationships, whatever it might be.
That is so awesome. I was just thinking to myself, wow, imagine a day in your life, what you can see, what you can unpack, how you can unravel stuff. Are you just in a cafe and you hear someone and you just say one little magical whisper and their whole world just crumbles or lights up? Is that the power that you have?
Yeah, look, it can happen, but here's a rule of thumb. The more you want to influence someone, the more you need to know them, right? It's very difficult to be influential when you don't know what levers someone responds to. right? So remember, there's three ways of inspiring someone to act in some way, right? There's coercion, there's manipulation, and there's influence. And I think those three are very important to keep separate. Coercion is any time I threaten a bad consequence if you don't do what I say. I'm trying to force you to do something, right? Manipulation, at least the way that most people think about it, is essentially I'm tricking you to do something that's good for me but bad for you. So both coercion and manipulation are win-lose, and that's why they're unethical. Make sense?
Yeah.
Influence, at least the way I like to look at it, is about helping you make a better decision, right? So if I'm a salesperson, I must believe that my product actually is valuable and does a good job. And that way I can help you make a good decision, which I now have confidence that once you make a good decision, you'll choose my product, right? If you won't choose my product when you're making good decisions, I need to change companies or I need to change products, right? That's the responsibility of the companies to upgrade itself if it's offering less than value, right?
Yeah.
The responsibility of a salesperson is to demonstrate that value. That's it. It's not to manipulate, it's not to trick, it's not to coerce, it's not to run over, it's not to overload people, it's not to make them feel guilty, it's not to make them feel bad. It's literally, here's a decision in front of you, make a good decision. And what can I do to help you do that? That means I can inform you, I can calm you, I can expand your thinking, I can dissolve your fears and concerns and obstacles. What I can't do is make the decision for you. I can just put you in a position where making the decision is simple, easy, and obvious for you.
Yeah.
Does it make sense?
Yeah. I love your explanation, despite the fact that the word influence has a lot of different connotations and meanings.
Of course.
Sadly, it has a much darker connection and association.
I think people use manipulation, coercion, and influence and persuasion sometimes almost synonymously, like they're the same thing. And whilst in the same ballpark, they're all in the ballpark of getting other people to make decisions and do things, right? Their fundamental strategies is quite different, and you have to separate them in your mind. Otherwise, you might accidentally, fall into the wrong category. As an example, I've got a hypnotherapy university where I teach people how to be hypnotherapists and become successful and so on. And part of that means how to get clients, right?
Yeah.
And this is a huge sticking point for most hypnotherapists. They want to help people, and they think they're useless at sales. They hate sales. They think it's horrible. But why? Because in their mind, they've confused categories. They think of salespeople. They only think of those salespeople that have coerced them or manipulate them into making bad decisions. The ones they don't think about are the salespeople that were a real pleasure to work with, that helped them make a good decision, because they're so organic, so natural, so easy for them to follow that, they said, they didn't even trigger that as a salesperson. They just thought that was a shop assistant, or that was a customer service rep, or that was a technician, right? They failed to recognize it as a sales conversation because their concept of sales is so warped by the concept of manipulation and trickery and coercion, which is basically bad sales, that they then end up having a personal conflict around trying to sell their service to other people.
That makes so much sense. So much sense. So many extra dimensions. Yes, that's awesome. So you, on the topic of your training and your online programs, you have created, last count, 100 and...
Oh, God knows. Way more than that by now. Several
200 and 300 and...
Yeah, something like that. I don't know the exact number. Let's put it this way. I've created so many programs, I sometimes forget some of the programs. So in other words, when we're offering something, someone asks me, I go, did I really record that? I thought I was just thinking of recording that. Oh, there you go. So yes, I've recorded a lot of stuff. Which
is heroic. What is that part of you that is just fearless and just output, create, share? Because a lot of people just get stuck. They're just too scared to do anything. So,
but believe it or not, it has nothing to do with fear. I'm actually, fear is actually one of my core, should we say, disabilities, problems, whatever you might want to call it, right? So I had to deal with fear a lot, to the point where I kind of usually ignore fear. When it's not actually a physical thing, of course, right? The thing that's driven all the content I've created, again, nothing to do with fear, it's curiosity. I really want to know. I want to do something, right? And if the tools I currently have don't let me do it properly, then I've got to break those tools down and rebuild them better. And all the products I've created are essentially me trying to investigate the tools and look at it in more and more refined ways to figure out, how does this tool work properly? How can we really make this work for people? How can I use this to achieve whatever outcomes we want? And of course, once I've got an answer to that, one of the things I find very motivating is sharing it with people, right? In my mind, I'm not sharing it with a bunch of strangers, although I guess technically I am. In my mind, I think about specific people in my school that would really enjoy learning this or really need to learn this to overcome something that they're stuck on. And so I'm really basically having a conversation with one or two people who've got a specific kind of problem, showing them how to solve that problem with hypnosis, and that becomes a new program. Does that make sense?
That's
So there's
very
no
cool.
fear has nothing to do with it. It's to do with curiosity and desire to help others.
Yeah. And now back to what you said about ignoring fear. How do you just ignore fear? What
Yeah,
part of your brain is involved in just like, do you just
sure. So,
put it in a
so,
box
so two
and
things, right? First of all, you have to separate two kinds of fears. We have reasonable fears and unreasonable fears. Reasonable fears are things like I'm standing in front of a truck, it's coming hurtling into me at 200 miles an hour. I'm afraid I'll get squashed, and you know what? I'm right. I should move, right? Or if the saber-toothed tiger manages to escape the zoo and starts licking his chops at me, that's a good kind of fear. That's the one that makes me want to run or fight or hide or something like that. So those are valuable fears, right? Almost every other kind of fear, and typically these are more social fears, are irrelevant, right? They're a hangover from a time when being ostracized from the tribe meant essentially a death sentence. Exile meant death. And so we have a predisposition to want to belong, to want to be part of a group. And then we're afraid of offending the group in order to be kicked out and whatever it is, right? So I spent most of my life on the fringes of groups anyway, so I know what the fringe looks like. And ultimately came to the reasoning or the rationale, it doesn't matter, right? Because all that fear is going to do is going to stop you from doing what or living the life you want. And I'll give you a very dramatic example of this. This is right. This is actually one of the reasons I quit my law firm and became a hypnotist. So I remember I told you I was signing up to all kinds of hypnosis courses. I don't know, for a year it was glorious, like 5 days of hell at the office, 2 days of pleasure in hypnotherapy, and then watch, rinse, repeat. Right.
Oh, I love your sarcasm. It's awesome.
So then I'm at a course, and there's this guy, the big guy, and his hypnotic language patterns were amazing. He was fluid, and they flowed, and he was convincing and charismatic. And every time I did exercise with him, I learned so many things. I admired this man immensely, right? And because at the time I was already formulating the idea of maybe I want to do this rather than law because I'm enjoying it much more and it's much more rewarding and so on. So I wanted to pick his brains and ask him, how long have you been a hypnotherapist for? How long have you been doing this? I wanted to find out, how did he do it? How did he move careers and the whole thing? His answer shocked me. He said, oh no, I'm not a hypnotist yet. I'm not ready for that. He was a train driver, right? And it shocked me because here's someone who is, as far as I'm concerned, an expert level quality, and he's not ready yet? How? Right? So then I realized, I mean, you think about it, whenever you've done anything that's important to you in life, every time you've done it, you've never been ready for it. You had to do it for one reason or another. I had to go to job interviews to get a job. I had to show up my first day at work, otherwise I get fired, right? I had to go and read a big, thick document like this, even though I was gouging my eyes out with boredom, because it's part of my career, shall we say, right? So a lot of times life forces you to do things you don't want to do, and ultimately you overcome them. In this case, nothing was forcing him. And so he never took action, which means, as far as I know, he's probably still a train driver.
Wow.
Right? And that shocked me so fundamentally that very night I went home and wrote up my resignation letter. I hung on to it for a couple of weeks, so I had to make a plan for how to leave. But I wrote the letter because I needed a ticking clock to tell me there's going to be an end to this. Otherwise, I will be forever taking courses, forever wondering what if, forever not taking that leap. And the leap is scary. It was terrifying, right? In fact, it was even more terrifying the very first day I woke up without a job, right? It was first glorious because, it was like a Disney movie, lights flooding, wind, little songbirds singing. And I woke up thinking, this is amazing. It's the first time I've woken up late in, years. And then, of course, reality started crashing in and I was terrified. No clients, no clue, no idea of how to get clients. So, the fear was accurate. It's just it's not worth being held back by it, because the place I learned to overcome the fear is not before I have the fear, it's after it. That's where all the information is that diffuses the fear. So I need experiences that will teach me why my fear is unfounded. And if my fear is preventing me from having those experiences, then I'm stuck in an infinite loop.
Yeah.
The only way to break it is, as the book says, feel the fear and do it anyways. Right?
So
That's
you've got the insight and the knowledge to be able to have a bird's eye view and go, well, if hindsight serves me here, then I should be
Mhm,
able to apply the same approach
mhm.
to this situation. For people that don't
Yeah,
have your knowledge and
yeah.
experience, what's the advice for them to get out of fear?
Risk small, but often.
Okay. Ooh,
Right?
nice.
Because basically fear is about risk.
Yeah.
Right? Risk means I'm doing something that may have consequences that I don't want. Right? And you're right. If you take big risks, well, if you're not even used to taking risks, you're gonna be so stressed, you're not be able to manage the situation, and chances are the risk will pan out badly. Right? So the idea is you've got to get used to risks. So start small, but you need a big exposure to it. Take lots and lots of little risks. Take conversational risks, emotional risks, relationship risks, slightly financial risk. And then again, when I mean financial risk, I mean, lose $1 or two, not lose your house. You get the
Yeah.
idea? So
Yeah.
tiny little risks and repeat them as often as you can. And when you become relatively immune to them, then you increase the risk, right? And I'm not saying you become a gambler. I'm just saying what you're doing is you're starting to raise your risk tolerance. And of course, the bigger the risks become, the more productive they have to be. You don't just start taking random risks for the sake of taking risks. The more you get used to taking risk, then you start taking strategic risks. In other words, risk that whilst they could go wrong, yes, the upside is so high that it's worth taking that risk, right? And then by this stage, you should have enough reference experiences to look back on to say it's worked out in all these places. Now this is tougher, yes. This is going to require more from me, yes, but I can do it. I proved it to myself with other things.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah. Love it. What's the most eye-opening experience you've had through either hypnosis or hypnotherapy personally or with a client that's just rocked your world?
I'll probably use clients because I've worked a lot with clients, and honestly, the stuff they can do is amazing, right? So, for example, one client I was working with, he wanted to have a better memory, so we did a series of hypnotic sessions with him. At the end of which, he basically he built $1 million coaching empire just of his ability to read clients. In other words, he would go into a room, talk to clients a little bit, automatically memorize all the things that were going on in that room, interpret all those things, come up with a whole bunch of conclusions, at the end of which he would present them to the client after just a short chat. It would blow their mind. Like, how the hell do you know me after such a short time? And I didn't teach him any of those strategies. All I did was talk to his unconscious about improving his memories and removing some of the traumas that were holding him back from having a, should we say, perfect memory, if you will. And it just blew me away. Once those blocks had been removed, literally within months, this is from someone who was doing okay as a coach, doing pretty well, right? So we're talking about good 5-figure income, to literally within a year or so having a 7-figure coaching business.
Wow.
It blew me away how quickly he transformed once those little switches had been flipped in his mind.
Yeah, that's so cool. When it comes to change and humans, we
Mhm.
want to be healthier, we want to earn more money, we want to, change our lifestyle, but there's
Yeah.
something in us that's just like we love to stay stuck. So, in your
Yes.
experience, what is either the hardest or easiest part of change?
Yeah. So I wouldn't necessarily categorize it as people loving to be stuck.
Well,
I think what people love is to be the same.
okay.
So we're used to ourselves, right? And
And that's why you are the expert in conversational hypnosis. Yeah, just conversation and language generally. Thank you for finding the words for me.
well, it's important because if someone loves being stuck versus someone loves staying the same, those are fundamentally different mindsets, and the leverage will look different, right? So if someone who likes being the same, what they're basically saying in hypnotherapy is saying, I want to totally change myself, but don't change anything about me, right? And which is a paradox. And that's where they get stuck. We wear this social mask, we'll call it the ego, right? This is what we want the world to see us like. There's lots of social psychology that shows that when people think they're not being observed, they'll act differently than when they think they're being observed, right? So we want the world to treat us a certain way, to see us a certain way, maybe wise or funny or clever or smart or sexy, whatever it might be. And we role play that so well that we eventually forget we're playing a role. We forget we're wearing a mask to interface with the world. And then we think that this mask is all that we are, right? One of the ways to look at hypnosis is to find out who are you when you're not being you. That mask, that thing that other people think is you, that even you might think is you. Make sense?
Yeah.
And that's the tricky part of change, because when you're underwater and everything around you is water, you don't even realize what water is. You need a contrast. You need to get out of the water to look back in the water and go, oh, that substance is water. But a fish won't know because that's just where it exists. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the good thing about the mask is it channels certain key talents and abilities and releases them to the world, because that's what you practiced as you're building this mask to do. The problem with the mask is it leaves all these other hidden talents and potentials blocked from you. And what hypnosis is, why it looks and feels so magical, is someone can suddenly have access to something that seems almost magical, but it isn't. It was always there. It's just they literally blocked themselves off from even experiencing it because a person like me doesn't have that kind of experience. Therefore, I can't have that kind of experience. That's kind of a subconscious reasoning, shall we say, right? So the biggest difficulty in making a change, I'd say, is identity, which is, can you conceive of yourself as a better version of you? That includes things that currently you don't believe is possible for you. Someone who got abused a lot might have difficulty believing in love. I can't be loved. I can't love, right? That's not true. That's just this splinter of personality that they're stuck in. Outside of that is all the love in the world. And so the skill as a coach or hypnotherapist would be, how do you maintain the core part of the personalities, the things that give them a sense of selfhood, whilst dissolving the perimeters around that are preventing them from tapping into hidden potentials, which ultimately lead to an amazing life that, well, let's put it this way. We all know that if only I could unlock the right door in my mind, I'd be amazing, right? Don't you have that secret sort of feeling in the back of your mind? If only this one little door could open up, then I'd be creative and charismatic and kind and successful and rich. And you know it's all there because you've seen little glimpses of it throughout your life, right? And the thing that keeps pulling you back into who you quote unquote are is that mask. So the more you can loosen the grip of that mask on your personality, the more you can explore your potentials outside of that mask, the more you have a, shall we say, a bigger mask or maybe several masks that you can choose from, the freer you tend to be. Does that help?
Yeah, love it. Love it. Why did you gravitate towards conversational hypnosis? What was it?
Great question. So I was doing hypnosis and I loved it. I thought it was phenomenal, interesting, fun, and for all the reasons I just described, taps into amazing potentials. And of course, at a law firm, even though I wasn't necessarily as excited by spending 12-hour days doing law, I really did enjoy the people I worked with, the colleagues. They were smart, they were fast, they were fun, they were interesting, engaging, charismatic, and so on, right? So I wanted to keep working with essentially executives, but I have zero skills around coaching or executive coaching, no pedigree. I wasn't consultant or anything like that. So I had no experience of any of it. But I did have a lot of experience of hypnosis by this point. And I realized, and this is where when I was introduced to Ericksonian hypnosis, I suddenly opened up a whole new door. The idea of doing hypnosis covertly, conversationally, is that a possibility? That's amazing. So that idea was in the back of my mind already, and it had already resonated with me when I was thinking about, well, I want to do coaching, executive coaching, but I have no skills in that. And I suddenly realized, well, what if I can take all these hypnosis skills I'm learning, do what Erickson did and become more covert, more conversational around it. Then I can build myself as a coach, but actually act as a hypnotherapist, get these amazing results. And it looks like the coaching is miraculous. Well, I guess it is, but I have zero coaching skills. At least at the time I had zero coaching skills. I hadn't had the hypnosis skills. I had to figure out a way of using them in that environment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a very resourceful act as if approach.
Yeah. I mean, it took me a while because I had some very crude tools to begin with, and I had to sort of test them, experiment, play around with them, and so on until I built up a system, shall we say. But if you don't start, then you'll never start.
Yeah.
Right.
Love it. And mind-bending language. So when I listen to your mind-bending language tracks, I spiral and I go deeper and deeper into some other world. What on earth is happening?
Yeah. So mind-bending language is interesting. The precursor of that was one of my mentors, John Overdurf. He had Beyond Words was his first version of that, and he's developed other models since then. And he himself had interested in a number of different things. There was hypnosis, NLP, a lot of meditation stuff, and spiritual development, and so on. And he tried to bring together a number of different disciplines. The Zen koans, which are these questions that seem ridiculous on the surface, but have forced us into a non-dual way of experiencing life. The famous one is, what's the sound of one hand clapping, right?
Yeah.
They're designed to shock the intellect because these are questions that can't be answered intellectually. And by doing so, it releases them into a more experiential form of experiencing the world. And in doing so, they both have enlightenment and the question's done its job, shall we say, right? The Sufi tradition has very similar stories. They're Sufi wisdom stories that are somewhat mind-bending. They don't really make sense, but they're kind of like cosmic jokes almost that explain the Sufi philosophy through these slightly trippy stories. And then the other big one was the NLP meta model. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. The meta model is a questioning model where you essentially dissolve people's problem realities by questioning them. When we did our objections, I used a little bit of meta model style language on that, right? And so at the time, the meta model, NLP people in the meta model, when they met Erickson, wanted to make the meta model more hypnotic and so on. So they came up with these really long, convoluted language patterns. It was called bullet therapy, where you say something like, you stack all these presuppositions, when's any time but now that you've been everything you've ever possibly wanted to be and choosing all the things in your life that are just right for you. And these things have gone rambling for an age. And of course, won't work very well because they're way too complex, right? And so what Overdove did is he combined the Ericksonian language patterns with the meta model questions, with the Sufi and Zen wisdom traditions, shall we say, and he just started experimenting with different ways of presenting language that would be non-linear. The intellect is very systematic, very linear, very methodical, very stage by stage. And when we talk, we tend to follow a linear progression. Even when we change topics, it's usually a logical flip that we've made, and then the new train of association starts building up, and again, in a very reasonable, rational way. Mind-bending language takes that away, makes it non-linear. The underlying idea is very clear. So it's not just talking gobbledygook, right? But it's so clear. It's like Moshe Feldenkrais called this the elusive obvious. Something is so clear, so obvious, but there's someone who doesn't know that yet. It's just they can't fathom it. It's just they don't understand it, right? It's kind of like a magic trick. If you watch a magic trick, it's amazing until you know how the magic trick is done, and you go, "Oh, I know he's done that now," right? So mind-bending language is a magic trick done linguistically, designed to force the mind into seeing the magic trick, so that you're no longer controlled by it. Because when the deception, the sleight of hand, whatever it is, once you can see it, you go, "Oh, I just see. He just did that." Right? And now you know. In the same way, with mind-bending language, you are placed in a position where the things that used to have power over you, the problems that had power over you, the underlying rationale, the, shall we say, misinterpreted idea that causes the problem, when you can see it clearly, it no longer has power over you, it just disappears. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The point of mind-bending language very often is not necessarily to talk to the conscious mind about this, but the unconscious, as an example. I worked with a guy once who had a cat phobia. And we did a whole bunch of mind-bending language stuff around that. It basically was, when he was young, he'd been feeding the neighbor's cat. It was in a dark room. It jumped on him and scared the bejesus out of him. And he's been afraid of cat ever since, right? So anyways, he's now mentally back in the room with the cat, and he thinks he's terrified. But his body is very relaxed. He doesn't know this yet because he's so used to being terrified of cats. So the mind-bending moment with him was to basically ask, so as you think about that cat, how's your body feel? And he went, what? That's a stupid question. It took a moment, and suddenly his face just broke out in the biggest grin of surprise and goes, this is wild. What the hell's going on? I don't understand it. Because he had, for as far as he's concerned, his whole adult life, had never been able to think of a single cat without the body emotion going crazy at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, wow.
It gets even wilder. What I didn't know at the time was that he also had a cat allergy. Literally walk into a room and say, there's been a cat here, even though there's no signs of it, because he's getting some hay fever style symptoms, right? Well, anyways, after the session was over, he and a friend drove to a cat shelter to test out, is this cat phobia thing working? And there's a little video of him in the cat shelter with 15 little kittens crawling all over him. He's completely nonplussed, know what's going on. But the best part is when he walks out and he's driving home, he's doing a little vlog to capture his thoughts. he suddenly realizes he's been in a cat room full of cats for half an hour and not a single symptom.
That's amazing.
Right? So that's really, I think, the power of the unconscious or the subconscious. And that's really what we want to tap into. And then with mind-bending language, we're basically freeing the subconscious from the associations that has forced it, in this case, to have a phobia and an allergy, the allergy being a phobia of the immune system, if you will. Once we cleared up one, the other cleared up with it. And suddenly, what looked like it was a medication issue turns out to be a psychological issue.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, wow. Epic. How does it make you feel when you have moments like that, when you've just unraveled? Amazing.
Like I can do real magic.
You do real magic.
Well, thank you. But yeah, it's amazing. And really, look, I have to keep a perspective in it. It's not me doing it, it's you doing it, because all the magic's happening inside you.
True.
But what I still find amazing is that such amazing things exist within people, that this untapped potential is just enormous.
Yeah.
And that's the excitement of hypnosis, that we can tap into these untapped potentials, right?
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. I have learned so much from you. I could talk to you forever, but I know you've got a big day on. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been brilliant.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much.